You're standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, looking at two boxes. One is the name brand at $4.79. The other is the store brand at $2.89. You pick the store brand. You feel a small wave of satisfaction. You just saved $1.90. You walk through the rest of the store applying the same logic to everything: the cheaper bread, the cheaper coffee, the cheaper paper towels. You drive home feeling like you handled your money well today. You used coupons, you bought generic, you skipped the things you wanted in favor of the things you needed. By every cultural measure of frugality, you did everything right. And yet, your savings account isn't growing. Your retirement balance still looks like it did 2 years ago. Every emergency still puts you back into a credit card balance. Something is broken in the math, and you can't quite figure out what. You've been doing the frugal thing for years. The frugal thing is supposed to work. Why doesn't it work for you? Here's the answer almost no one is willing to say out loud. A specific category of frugality is actively keeping you broke. Not the frugality of careful spending, the frugality of small, visible savings while ignoring the much larger, invisible drains. The kind of frugality that feels like discipline and produces nothing. The kind that congratulates you for saving $2 on cereal while a $1,200 car payment is silently eating your future. The kind that confuses being cheap with being smart. Today I'm going to walk you through 11 of those habits, the ones that look financially responsible from the outside and produce a person who's still broke at 50. Quick disclaimer before we start. None of this is financial advice. This is education about patterns. Use it as a map, not a prescription. Let's get into it. Number 1, skipping cheap purchases while ignoring the expensive ones. This is the foundational pattern that almost everything else on this list grows out of. You agonize over a $4 coffee. You agonize over the $14 lunch you brought from home instead of buying. You feel guilty about a $30 Amazon order. Meanwhile, your housing payment is $2,500 a month. Your car payment is $640. Your insurance is $280. Your subscriptions are $250. The big four categories of housing, transportation, insurance, and recurring obligations are consuming 60 to 75% of your take-home pay, and you've never once interrogated whether they need to be that high. The small $4 coffee gets all your financial attention. The $2,000 housing decision you made 3 years ago gets none. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data updated through 2026, housing alone accounts for roughly 33% of average household spending. Transportation accounts for another 17%. Together, those two categories consume half of every dollar most Americans earn. The $4 coffee is 1/10 of 1%. The frugality energy is being spent on the smallest possible target while the largest possible target sits unexamined. This isn't frugality, it's anxiety performance. Real frugality interrogates the big numbers. Anxiety frugality fights about the small ones because the small ones feel manageable while the big ones feel terrifying. Number 2. Buying cheap items that fail and need replacement. This is the false economy that traps more people in long-term broke status than almost any other pattern. You buy the $38 pair of shoes because the $85 pair felt extravagant. 6 months later, the sole separates. You buy another pair. 6 months after that, the same thing happens. Across 2 years, you've spent $114 and you currently own 0 functional shoes. The $85 pair you kept passing on would have lasted 3 years and saved you $29 while delivering vastly better outcomes. According to research from earth.org through early 2026, the average American throws away roughly 82 pounds of clothing every year, 11 million tons of textile waste nationally, most of it cheap fast fashion that failed within months of purchase. The same pattern operates across furniture, appliances, electronics, tools, kitchenware, and almost every other durable goods category. A budget refrigerator priced at $600 typically lasts 6 to 8 years before requiring replacement. A premium refrigerator at $1,500 typically lasts 13 to 17 years. Spread across 2 decades, the cheap path costs more in total dollars while producing more breakdowns, more food waste, and more disruption. The buying cheap habit feels like saving. The buying cheap habit is paying multiple times for the same item across years. Real frugality calculates cost per use across the expected lifespan. Cheap frugality only looks at the price tag. The math punishes the second approach reliably. Number 3. Clipping coupons while making no plan for the savings. You spend 45 minutes on Sunday cutting coupons and browsing promo codes. You save $8.75 at the grocery store. You feel productive. The $8.75 disappears back into general spending the moment you walk out of the store. There's no separate account where coupon savings get deposited. There's no automated transfer. There's no plan. The savings exist as a feeling, not as a number. Across a year, you might have saved $300 or $400 in coupon usage. You can't point to any of it. It got absorbed into the same lifestyle that would have consumed it without the coupons. According to research on consumer behavior, the average coupon user saves roughly 2 to 3% on grocery spending, while spending 15 to 20% more on impulse purchases triggered by being in the store. The coupons themselves can be a net loss when you factor in the additional spending they encourage. Even when they produce real savings, those savings need somewhere to go. If they don't go into a designated account, they don't exist. The 45 minutes was spent generating savings that never compounded into anything. Real frugality directs the saved money toward a specific destination. Cheap frugality generates the feeling of saving and lets the money disappear into the same monthly flow it would have entered anyway. Number 4. Driving across town to save $3 on gas. You see a station 4 miles away that's 8 cents cheaper per gallon. You drive over, you fill up, you feel like you won. The math reveals itself if you actually run it. 8 cents per gallon times 15 gallons equals $1.20 of savings. Driving an additional 8 miles round trip in a car averaging 25 miles per gallon at $3.50 a gallon costs you roughly $1.12 in additional fuel. Your net savings is 8 cents. You spent 20 minutes of your time and put additional wear on your car to save 8 cents. This same pattern plays out across countless categories. Driving to 3 different stores to save 50 cents per item. Crossing town for a coupon. Going out of your way for a slightly cheaper subscription. The time and fuel and mental energy involved often consume the savings entirely or produce a tiny net positive that wasn't worth the effort. Time is a currency. People who reach financial stability tend to value their time at a specific dollar amount per hour and refuse to engage in optimization activities that produce less than that hourly rate. People who don't reach financial stability spend hours chasing small savings while ignoring opportunities to use those same hours on income-producing activities. Real frugality is selective. It picks the highest leverage targets and ignores the small noise. Cheap frugality treats every dollar of potential savings as equally valuable, which means time gets allocated chaotically with poor returns. Number 5. Hoarding things you might use someday. The garage full of items you bought because they were on sale. The closet stuffed with clothes you haven't worn in years but might wear again. The pantry full of cans that have been there since 2022. The boxes in the basement labeled miscellaneous that haven't been opened since you moved in. This pattern feels like frugality because nothing is being thrown away. Nothing is being wasted. You're using everything. Except you're not. You're storing everything, which is different. Storage is a cost. The average American home contains roughly 300,000 items per UCLA research on consumer behavior. The square footage required to store all of these items is significant. People who hoard accumulated possessions often end up in larger homes than they would otherwise need, paying higher mortgages, higher utilities, higher property taxes, and higher insurance just to house items they don't actually use. The economics are deceptive. The cheap purchase from 3 years ago that's sitting unused in a box now costs you ongoing rent in the form of the square footage required to store it. According to a study cited by the Wall Street Journal, the average American household spends roughly $1,800 per year on storage-related costs, including rented self-storage units, larger housing footprints, and time spent organizing. None of these costs are visible. All of them are real. Real frugality is ruthless about what stays. Cheap frugality keeps everything in case it becomes useful, which means everything stays and the cost of storing it quietly compounds. Let me pause for a moment because something important is becoming visible. The first 5 habits all share an underlying pattern. They produce visible savings or visible discipline while ignoring invisible drains. The $4 coffee gets attention while the $2,000 housing decision doesn't. The cheap shoes feel responsible while the long-term replacement cycle doesn't. The coupons feel productive while the lack of savings destination doesn't. The crosstown gas trip feels smart while the time and fuel costs don't. The hoarded items feel like savings while the storage cost doesn't. The pattern is consistent. Visible behavior optimized at the expense of invisible math. Real frugality is the inverse. It interrogates the invisible math and lets the visible behavior follow whatever the math demands. Number 6, refusing to spend on quality tools that produce income. The freelancer who works on a 6-year-old laptop that crashes during client calls because upgrading feels indulgent. The contractor who uses second-rate tools that take twice as long to complete jobs because professional-grade tools feel extravagant. The remote worker who buys a $30 office chair from a discount store and develops back problems that cost thousands in medical bills. The pattern shows up everywhere people have decided that spending on equipment that supports their income generation is a luxury rather than an investment. The math is brutal here because the productivity loss compounds faster than the equipment cost. A laptop that crashes once a week during client work costs the freelancer client trust, billable hours, and potential repeat business. A $400 upgrade pays for itself in productivity within a single month for most knowledge workers. The same dynamic operates for tools, software subscriptions that genuinely improve output, ergonomic equipment, professional clothing for client-facing work, transportation reliability for service businesses, and education that increases earning capacity. According to research published by Inc. magazine, 65% of self-made millionaires have at least 3 income streams. Building those income streams requires investing in the equipment, education, and infrastructure that makes them possible. The frugal-feeling decision to skimp on income-producing tools often costs 10 or 20 times more in foregone income than the tool would have cost outright. Real frugality distinguishes between consumption spending and investment spending. The first should be optimized for value. The second should be optimized for capability, even at higher upfront cost. Cheap frugality treats all spending equally and underfunds the categories that would actually grow income. Number 7, avoiding financial education because it feels expensive. The $30 book that explains tax-advantaged accounts in a way that could save you thousands across decades. You don't buy it. The $150 online course on negotiation that could add $10,000 to your next salary review. You don't take it. The financial advisor consultation that would clarify your retirement trajectory. You skip it. The 2-hour workshop on real estate investing that could change how you think about housing. You don't attend. The pattern shows up everywhere people refuse to spend on knowledge that would produce returns vastly exceeding the cost. Financial illiteracy costs the average American over $1,000 per year in direct losses, fees paid, interest accumulated, preventable mistakes made, and opportunities ignored, according to research from the National Financial Educators Council. The indirect costs are far higher. The missed investment returns that compound for decades. The years spent in expensive debt that could have been avoided. The retirement that never becomes possible because the math was never understood. Every other habit on this list traces back to insufficient understanding. The $30 book or the $100 course almost always pays for itself within weeks. Real frugality invests aggressively in knowledge that produces returns. Cheap frugality treats education spending as discretionary and consumes the equivalent dollars on items that produce no return at all. Number 8. Penny pinching on essentials that affect health. The cheap food, the skipped doctor visits, the avoided dentist appointments, the medications stretched beyond their dosage schedule, the prescription contacts worn past expiration, the mattress kept 12 years past its useful life because replacement feels expensive, the shoes worn until they cause foot problems, the chair that ruined your back. The bargain processed foods that quietly produce the metabolic disease showing up at 50. According to the American Diabetes Association, the average annual medical cost for someone with diagnosed diabetes runs roughly $12,000 per year above the cost for someone without diabetes. Across 30 years of post-diagnosis life, that's $360,000 in additional medical spending. Some of that is genetics. A meaningful portion traces back to decades of cheap food choices that felt like savings at the grocery store. The dental work avoided for years that turns into a $5,000 implant. The annual physical that gets skipped for a decade until the cancer that could have been caught at stage 1 gets diagnosed at stage 3. The eye exam that gets delayed until a treatable condition becomes a permanent vision issue. Health is the foundation underneath every other financial decision. People who can't work because their health collapsed don't have financial trajectories at all. They have medical bills and disability claims. Real frugality invests in foundational health because the alternative is catastrophic. Cheap frugality saves dollars now and pays them back in tens of thousands at the doctor's office decades later. Number 9. Refusing to pay for convenience that protects compounding behavior. This one is counterintuitive and almost no one talks about it. The automatic savings transfer that requires zero effort to maintain because you set it up once. The recurring investment contribution that takes the decision out of your hands every month. The bill autopay that prevents late fees. The grocery delivery that prevents the 4-hour Saturday shopping trip that ends in $50 of impulse purchases. The meal prep service that prevents 3 takeout orders a week. The dishwasher you can run while doing something else. The wash and fold service when working 70 hours that prevents a complete domestic collapse. The $15 app subscription that saves you 10 hours a month on tax prep. None of these are inherently good purchases. All of them can be good purchases in specific contexts where they protect a higher value compounding behavior. The autopay protects your credit score, which protects your future borrowing cost, which can save tens of thousands of dollars across a lifetime. The automatic savings transfer protects your ability to actually save, which protects your retirement trajectory, which is the single most important financial outcome of your life. The grocery delivery protects you from impulse spending at the store, which often more than pays for the delivery fee. Cheap frugality looks at the delivery fee as a waste. Real frugality looks at the total system and asks whether the small recurring fee protects a much larger compounding behavior. When the answer is yes, the convenience purchase is the frugal purchase. The reluctance to pay for convenience often costs more than the convenience itself. Number 10. Tracking pennies while ignoring percentages. You have a spreadsheet with every coffee, every snack, every small impulse purchase. You can tell me to the penny what you spent on incidentals last month. You can't tell me what percentage of your gross income flows to retirement accounts. You can't tell me your current debt-to-income ratio. You can't tell me what your effective tax rate was last year. You can't tell me what you're paying in fund expense ratios inside your 401k. The penny tracking feels rigorous. The percentage tracking is what actually moves the needle. Vanguard's How America Saves report consistently finds that the average employee 401k contribution rate hovers around 7.7% of salary, with the median significantly lower. Combined with employer matches, the average total savings rate reaches roughly 14.2%. Moving your personal savings rate from 5% to 15% of income is the single highest leverage financial change available to almost any American worker. That percentage shift produces life-changing differences in outcomes. Tracking every coffee produces a feeling of discipline. Moving the savings rate from 5 to 15% across 30 years on a $75,000 salary at 8% average annual return produces approximately $900,000 in additional retirement wealth. The penny tracking generated zero of that $900,000. The percentage shift generated all of it. Real frugality focuses on percentages. Cheap frugality focuses on pennies because pennies feel controllable while percentages feel scary. The scary numbers are where the actual wealth building lives. Number 11. Treating frugality as identity instead of strategy. This is the deepest version of the pattern, and it's the one that holds people in broke status more reliably than any other. Somewhere along the way, you started to think of yourself as a frugal person. The identity feels good. Frugal people are responsible. Frugal people don't waste. Frugal people are self-sufficient. The identity provides a sense of moral standing that compensates for the lack of financial progress. But the identity also locks you into behaviors that don't serve you anymore. The identity prevents you from spending on income-producing tools because that wouldn't be frugal. The identity prevents you from outsourcing low-value tasks because that wouldn't be frugal. The identity prevents you from investing in education that would change your trajectory because that wouldn't be frugal. The identity prevents you from upgrading to better quality items that would last because the higher purchase price wouldn't be frugal. The identity prevents you from accepting that some categories of spending genuinely produce wealth, and refusing to spend in those categories is the opposite of wealth building. According to research on consumer psychology, identity-driven behavior is among the most resistant to change because changing the behavior feels like abandoning the self. The frugal identity becomes a cage. The cage is comfortable. The cage produces predictable outcomes. The outcomes are still broke, still tired, still feeling responsible, still wondering why the math doesn't work. Real frugality is a strategy that adapts to context. It spends aggressively where spending produces returns. It cuts ruthlessly where cutting produces no loss. It optimizes for outcomes, not for the feeling of discipline. Cheap frugality is an identity that demands constant displays of restraint, regardless of whether the restraint serves you. The two look identical from the outside. They produce dramatically different financial lives. Let me step back and tell you what's actually happening across all 11 of these habits. They share a single underlying error. The error is the confusion of activity with progress. Each habit produces visible activity: the coupon clipping, the store brand selection, the penny tracking, the hoarding, the driving across town. The activity feels productive. The activity generates a story about being financially responsible. The activity doesn't produce wealth. The activity often actively prevents wealth building because the energy and attention spent on the activity could have been directed toward the small number of decisions that actually move the needle. Real wealth building is shockingly boring once you understand it. Set the right housing decision. Set the right transportation decision. Set the right savings rate. Automate it. Then leave it alone for 30 years and let compound returns do the work. The 5 or 6 structural decisions that determine your financial future fit on an index card. Everything else is noise. The 11 habits we walk through are versions of focusing on the noise while the structural decisions get ignored. The person clipping coupons in a house they can't really afford, with a car payment they shouldn't have made, and a savings rate of 3% isn't being frugal. They're performing frugality while financial structural failure happens in the background. The performance is loud, the failure is quiet. Both are happening at the same time, and the performance can't fix the failure, no matter how committed the performance becomes. Here's the deeper truth that makes this so hard to talk about. Many of these habits were taught by well-meaning parents, grandparents, and culture itself, often during economic conditions that no longer exist. In 1955, when prices were lower and wages relatively higher, clipping coupons might have produced meaningful savings as a percentage of total household spending. In 2026, with housing consuming 48% of median household income per Atlanta Fed data, and car payments averaging $767 per month per Experian Q4 2025 data, coupons can't possibly close the gap. The math has changed. The big numbers have grown enormously faster than the small numbers. Frugality strategies that focused on small categories made sense in an economy where housing was 20% of income and cars were paid off in 3 years. Those strategies don't make sense in 2026. The big categories have grown to consume so much of the income that no amount of penny optimization at the margin can fix structural decisions made at the wrong scale. This is why so many Americans are working harder, earning more, and feeling more broke than ever. They're doing the frugal things they were taught. The frugal things were calibrated for a different economy. The frugal things produce small savings while the structural numbers run away from them. The result is a generation that genuinely believes they're being financially responsible while the math punishes them anyway. The punishment isn't because they're irresponsible. The punishment is because the tools they were given were the wrong tools for the actual problem. The actual problem in 2026 is structural. Housing costs that consume nearly half of median income. Car payments that consume another 15%. Insurance that consumes another 5%. Subscriptions and recurring obligations that consume another 5%. By the time the structural categories finish, 65 to 75% of income is committed before the first coupon gets clipped. The only meaningful financial intervention available is at the structural level. Choose smaller housing. Choose used or paid-off transportation. Optimize insurance through annual review. Cut recurring subscriptions ruthlessly. Move the savings rate from 5% to 15%. Those 5 decisions, executed once and maintained, produce more wealth than 30 years of coupons. Coupons are pleasant. They're not wealth building. The shift from cheap frugality to real frugality requires something most people resist. It requires looking at the big numbers. It requires interrogating decisions that already feel locked in. It requires asking whether the house was the right house, whether the car was the right car, whether the insurance is appropriately priced, whether the recurring obligations actually deliver value. These questions are uncomfortable because the answers might require change. The discomfort is exactly why the questions don't get asked. The avoidance of the questions is what locks people into the cheap frugality pattern. They can't change the small things because the small things aren't the problem. They won't change the big things because the big things feel impossible to change. So they stay stuck, performing frugality, generating no progress, and wondering why the math never works. If you watched this and recognized yourself in 3 or 7 or 11 of these habits, the path forward isn't to stop being frugal. It's to redirect your frugality toward the targets that actually move the needle. Stop spending energy on the coffees and start spending energy on the savings rate. Stop spending energy on the coupons and start spending energy on the housing decision. Stop spending energy on the cheap shoes and start spending energy on the percentage of income flowing toward investments. The energy you have for financial improvement is finite. Spending it on small targets doesn't leave any for big targets. Real progress requires reallocating the energy itself, not just continuing the same activity at higher intensity. The hard part is that this reallocation requires getting clear on your real numbers, not your guesses, not your feelings, not your sense of being financially responsible. The actual percentages, the actual flows, the actual structural decisions that are quietly determining your trajectory while you're focused on store brand cereal. I built a digital product called the Financial Reset System for that exact purpose. It walks you through getting clear on your real numbers, finding where your money is actually leaking, sequencing your priorities so the structural decisions get the attention they deserve, and building a 30-day plan that creates the foundation real frugality gets built on. Every number auto-calculates as you fill it in. The PDF guide walks you through each step. The 30-day plan gives you weekly checkpoints. The link is in the description and in my profile if you want to take a look. The cheap frugality pattern can be unlearned. It just takes seeing the real math instead of the comforting performance of restraint. Here's the closing thought worth carrying with you. Frugality is supposed to make you wealthy. When done right, it does. Across history, the families and individuals who built lasting financial stability did so through real frugality, the kind that interrogates the big decisions and lets the small ones follow naturally. The cheap frugality pattern is something different. It's a costume of restraint worn over structural fragility. The costume feels protective. The costume changes nothing about the underlying numbers. The numbers continue running their course regardless of how convincingly the costume gets performed. You have a choice in front of you. Continue the frugality that produces nothing but a feeling, or redirect the same energy toward frugality that actually compounds. The first option is comfortable. The second option is uncomfortable for about 90 days and then becomes the new normal. The financial difference between the two paths is not small. Across a decade, it's the difference between being slightly less broke and being structurally wealthy. Across 30 years, it's the difference between working until 70 and having options at 55. The math doesn't care which path you choose. The math just compounds whatever you give it. Cheap frugality gives it almost nothing and gets almost nothing back. Real frugality gives it the structural decisions and gets back the life you actually wanted. The cereal aisle didn't need to be the battleground. The big numbers were the battleground the whole time. You just couldn't see them through the noise of the small ones.